The glow of the dashboard cast long, trembling shadows as he gripped the wheel. The memory of that night on I-40 still sharp, raw. 15 years. 15 years he'd tamed the beast of the open road, seen it all: blizzards, wrecks, engines sputtering in the middle of nowhere. But what had happened 3 years ago? A phantom voice on the CB, and the chilling echo of what almost was, still made his hands clench. Some nights, the dream seized him, a cold sweat, the phantom voice, the looming dread. It was late October, past 2 in the morning, and the belly of his rig hummed with a load of electronics destined for Oklahoma City. Interstate 40, through the Arkansas stretch, was a ribbon of desolation in the deep night, flanked by an endless, dark forest. A truck might pass every 10-15 minutes, a fleeting ghost in the opposite lane. This was the kind of isolation only truckers truly knew, a solitude that seeped into the bones. He'd been wrestling the road since 6 that morning. Tiredness gnawed at him, eyes burning, eyelids heavy, a constant battle to stay awake. Then, about 40 miles shy of Fort Smith, a voice pierced the lonely static of Channel 19, the trucker's lifeline. It was a woman, no older than his daughter, perhaps early 20s, her voice splintered with terror. "Please, somebody help me," she pleaded, a sob catching in her throat. "My car broke down. I'm stuck on the side of the road. Something's wrong with the engine. It won't start. I'm so scared out here alone. Please, if anyone can hear this, I need help." His heart lurched. He pictured his own daughter, young and vulnerable, stranded in this inky blackness. He knew the dangers lurking on a dark highway, especially for a woman alone. He snatched the CB handset. "This is Sooner Express eastbound on I-40, he announced, his company name a reflex. "I hear you, miss. What's your location? I can stop and help." The relief in her voice was immediate, a fragile dam breaking. "Oh, thank God. Thank you so much. I'm at mile marker 62, eastbound side. My hazard lights are on, but my phone's dead. I've been here almost an hour. I was starting to think no one would ever stop." Mile marker 62 was only 12 miles ahead. "I'll be there in about 10 minutes, he promised. Her thanks spilled out 6 times over, punctuated by muffled sobs of relief. He felt a quiet satisfaction. This was the brotherhood of the road, paying forward the kindness he'd received in his own times of need. As the mile markers blurred, he eased off the gas, scanning the darkness for her hazard lights. A quarter-mile ahead, their rhythmic flash cut through the black. A small car pulled over on the right shoulder. He flicked on his own four-ways, signaling his intention, and started to pull in behind her, leaving ample room, a cautious distance. That's when a knot of unease tightened in his gut. The car sat perfectly straight, aligned with the shoulder knot askew, not limply abandoned as if a broken engine had forced it to the curb. And the hazard lights, though flashing, seemed too bright, too new. But the most jarring detail: no steam, no smoke, no telltale signs of an overheated engine. He let his engine idle, the cab a silent box around him, debating. Was it just the exhaustion playing tricks, the paranoia of the late hour? He pressed the CB button. "I'm the truck behind you with the flashers," he said, his voice measured. "Are you okay, miss?" Her reply was instant, but the tremor was gone. A new eagerness edged her tone. "Yes, I'm fine now that you're here. Can you come up to my car? I think there might be something wrong with my engine belt." The blood in his veins turned to ice. Engine belt. No terrified, stranded motorist, certainly not a young woman who had been weeping moments earlier, would speak of an engine belt at 2 a.m. His gaze sharpened, sweeping the car ahead, then instinctively flickered to the woods. Movement. Shadows detaching from shadows. At least 2 figures, perhaps more, shifting between the trees on the roadside. They tried to melt within the darkness, but he saw them closer to the road now, closing the gap. His realization was a cold, hard blow. This wasn't a breakdown. This was a trap. He seized the CB handset, but before he could speak, her voice again. Different now. The scared girl was gone, replaced by a chillingly composed presence. "Come on up here, driver. We know you can see us. Don't make this harder than it has to be." He slammed the transmission into gear, the monstrous engine roaring to life. 18 wheels, 40,000 pounds of cargo lurched onto the highway, accelerating with a desperate urgency. In his mirrors, he watched figures spill from the woods, scrambling toward the road, but they were too late. He was already a blur in the darkness, leaving them behind. The CB crackled again, but this time it was a man's voice, a torrent of profanity and threats, promising retribution, vowing to catch him. He switched channels to 17, his voice strained but clear. "This is Sooner Express, eastbound on I-40 near mile marker 62. There are people trying to ambush trucks at that location. Do not stop if you see a broken-down car with hazards flashing. Repeat, it's a trap." Another trucker's voice, older, calmer, cut through the static. "Copy that, Sooner Express. This is Maverick, westbound, about 20 miles from your location. I'm calling the Arkansas State Police right now. Are you safe?" "I'm safe for now," he replied. "But there were at least 3 or 4 people, and they have CB equipment. They're probably still monitoring this channel." Sure enough, the angry voice returned on Channel 19, spewing more threats, bragging that they knew these highways better than any cop. He and Maverick retreated to Channel 17, exchanging updates until their paths crossed, 2 beacons of light in the vast, dark highway. 30 minutes later, the Arkansas State Police called his CB, asking for the driver who reported the ambush. He identified himself, gave his location. They were sending units to mile marker 62, they said, asking him to meet them at the next truck stop for a statement. At the Flying J outside Fort Smith, the trooper's words sent another chill down his spine. This wasn't an isolated incident. 3 other times in the past 6 months, on that same stretch of highway. Fake breakdowns, CB radio lures. One Tennessee driver had been beaten and robbed. Another, like him, had grown suspicious and escaped. But the third, a Missouri driver, had simply vanished. His truck, abandoned at mile marker 58, just 4 miles from where the ambush against him had been attempted. The driver was never found. The troopers suspected the same group, moving their deadly game further down the highway when one spot grew too hot. Their targets were truckers, known for carrying cash, valuable CB equipment, and cargo that fetched a price. And they exploited the unwritten code of the road, the culture of helping a fellow traveler in distress. By the time the troopers reached mile marker 62, the car was gone, the ambushers vanished. But they found tire tracks deep in the woods, evidence of hidden vehicles, and cigarette butts, silent witnesses to hours of patient, predatory waiting. He gave his statement, his contact information. As he turned back to his rig, a younger trooper pulled him aside. "You were smart to get out of there," he said, his voice low. "Based on what happened to that Missouri driver, these people aren't just looking to rob trucks. I think they're capable of a lot worse." He finished his run to Oklahoma City, but the incident clung to him like exhaust fumes. The most terrifying part, how perfectly the woman's terrified voice had played its role. So utterly convincing. If he hadn't noticed the telltale signs, the car, the figures in the trees, he would have walked, unsuspecting, into their trap. Now, his responses to any call for help on the CB radio were irrevocably changed, forever tinged with suspicion, forever shadowed by that night. The memory is a mile marker, forever etched. I-40, mile 62. I still slow down there, my eyes tracing the dark line of trees that border the right side of the highway. Sometimes I swear I see shadows shift between them, a silent vigil maintained for the next Good Samaritan. It's a terrible thing when your innate desire to help becomes a weapon for criminals. My truck still rolls the familiar routes, and Channel 19 still crackles, alive with disembodied voices. But now, every cry for help echoes a different, chilling sound, that scared woman's voice, turning cold and predatory in my memory. Trust, they say, takes years to build and seconds to shatter. That night, it wasn't just a robbery they attempted. They robbed me of my faith in the basic decency of strangers seeking aid on the open road. I've logged 8 years as a trucker, and early on, the cardinal rule hammered into us was clear: no hitchhikers. Most companies had ironclad policies against it, and for good reason. You never truly know who you're inviting into your cab, and once they're in, you're stuck until the next safe stop. Yet sometimes, that flicker of human decency overpowers common sense, leading to a decision that haunts you. This played out precisely 2 years ago on Highway 287, cutting through the vast expanse of the Texas Panhandle. It was a routine haul, agricultural equipment from Amarillo down to Beaumont, a run I'd probably done 100 times. Early June, and the sky had been brooding all afternoon, a dark bruise spreading over the horizon. By the time I cleared Childress, the light was gone, swallowed by a sky black as tar, and the wind was picking up with a fierce, almost vocal intensity. The radio had been buzzing all day with severe thunderstorm warnings, tornadoes, golf ball-sized hail. My only hope was to outrun the worst of it, but Mother Nature had her own timetable. Around 7 in the evening, as I was navigating the absolute middle of nowhere, the heavens ripped open. Rain so biblical, so dense, that even with my wipers screaming on high, I could barely discern 10 feet beyond my grill. The wind battered my trailer, a relentless invisible fist, forcing me to wrestle the steering wheel just to maintain my lane. Lightning fractured the darkness, so close I felt the static electricity prickle my skin, followed by thunder that vibrated through the cab, rattling my teeth. I was scanning desperately for a safe spot to pull over, to ride out the deluge, when I saw her. 100 yards ahead, just a dark, wavering silhouette in the storm. Thumb outstretched. My first thought was a trick of the exhausted eye. Who, in their right mind, hitchhikes in a tempest like this? But as I drew closer, the figure resolved into a woman, probably in her 30s, utterly drenched and shivering. My gut reaction, honed by years on the road and company policy, screamed, "Keep driving." This storm was dangerous enough without adding complications. Then, my headlights caught her face. She wasn't just wet, not just cold. She was terrified. It was the raw, primal fear of someone running for their life, and the sheer desperation in her eyes twisted something within me. I pulled over, rolling down the passenger window. She stumbled towards the truck, shaking uncontrollably from cold, from fear, I couldn't tell. "Please help me," she screamed over the wail of the wind. "My car broke down 5 miles back, and I've been walking for over an hour. I just need a ride to the next town." She seemed harmless enough, small, maybe 5'4", in jeans and a t-shirt plastered to her frame. No visible weapons, no backpack or bag that could conceal anything. Just a scared woman lost in a brutal storm. "Get in," I heard myself say, the words against my better judgment. "But I can only take you to the next truck stop." She clambered into the cab, leaving a trail of water, her gratitude so raw she was almost weeping. "Thank you so much," she gasped. "I thought I was going to die out here." She introduced herself as Linda Kowalski. I told her my name was Maria and handed her an old towel from my sleeper berth. She dried her face and hair, but the tremors didn't stop. I cranked the heat, eased back onto the road, driving slowly, carefully, through the chaos. Initially, everything felt normal. Linda was quiet, her gaze fixed on the rain-swept highway, her occasional thank you soft and sincere. She seemed genuinely relieved, and a warmth spread through me, the satisfaction of helping someone in genuine distress. The storm showed no signs of relenting, reinforcing my decision not to leave her stranded. But 10 miles down the road, an unease began to curdle in my gut. She kept looking at me. Not just polite glances, but long, intense stares, as if memorizing my features. Each time I caught her eye, she'd offer a smile, but it wasn't friendly. It was the kind of smile that made my skin crawl. Then the questions started, deeply personal inquiries that felt inappropriate for someone I'd just met. How long had I been driving? Was I married? Kids? Where did I live off-road? And then, the killer. How much money did you make? The alarm bells clanged. Why do you want to know about my finances? I asked, my voice tighter than I'd intended. Her expression hardened instantly. The fake gratitude vanished, replaced by something cold, calculating. Just making conversation, she said, but her voice now had an edge, a sharpness that hadn't been there before. I told her I needed to focus on the road, hinting she should pipe down. But instead of retreating, she pressed harder, her questions becoming more aggressive. What was I hauling? Where was it going? What routes did I usually take? The precision of her interrogation felt chillingly deliberate, the kind of questions only someone planning a truck heist would ask. By now, my worry had twisted into full-blown dread. We were still in the middle of nowhere, at least 20 miles from the nearest truck stop. The storm raged, isolating us. I couldn't just pull over and kick her out. A terrible mistake had been made. That's when she reached into her pocket. She produced a cell phone. My car broke down 5 miles back, she'd said, walking for over an hour. But the phone was bone dry. No water damage, no condensation. If she'd been out in that downpour for that long, the phone should have been soaked. She made a call, speaking in hushed tones, but I caught snippets. Got one, 20 miles out. Agricultural equipment. My blood ran cold. She was talking about me, my load. This wasn't a random breakdown. This was a setup. She hung up, turning to me with that same frigid smile. Change of plans, Maria. You're taking the next exit and heading north toward Quanah. My voice was steady, despite the tremor in my hands. No, I told you, I'm only taking you to the next truck stop. That's where you get out. Her smile evaporated completely. I'm not asking you, Maria. I'm telling you. Take the next exit north, or this is going to get very unpleasant for both of us. That's when the knife appeared. A folding blade, about 4 inches, drawn from her other pocket. She held it low against her leg, but the intent was clear. I wasn't giving a hitchhiker a ride. I was being kidnapped. My mind raced, trapped, an armed woman, likely with accomplices waiting. The storm ensured no witnesses. My CB was useless this far out. Then a memory surfaced, a piece of advice from my old trainer. A big rig is a powerful weapon if you know how to use it. The next exit was 2 miles ahead. The green sign bled through the rain, a sickly beacon to Linda and whatever cold promise awaited us beyond the exit. I had to move, and move now, before the highway swallowed me whole. Still on the main road, I began to bleed speed from the rig, a gradual deceleration that lulled Linda into a false sense of compliance. Her grip on the knife eased, her shoulders softening almost imperceptibly. But instead of the gentle arc onto the ramp, I tore the wheel hard right, launching the 18-wheeler off the asphalt and into the unforgiving grass median. The truck bucked and screamed, every lurch a fresh assault on my spine. Linda, a rag doll in the passenger seat, slammed against the door as the knife, a glint of predatory steel, spun from her grasp and clattered somewhere beneath the dash. My foot stomped the brake, sending the monstrous machine sliding through the mud, a violent ballet of steel and earth. Before she could even process the impact, my door was open, and I was airborne, leaping from the cab into the punishing downpour. The rain hit me like a physical blow, blurring the world, but I didn't care. I rounded the front of the truck, wrenched open her door. "Get out!" I roared, my voice raw against the wind and rain. "Get out of my truck right now!" Linda, dazed but far from defeated, scrabbled on the floor, her eyes desperate for the misplaced blade. I didn't give her the chance. My hand locked around her arm, a vice grip, and I hauled her out, her body a dead weight against the deluge. She hit the muddy ground with a sickening thud, a howl of rage ripping from her throat as she called me every name under the sun, threats of violence thick in the cold air. But stripped of her weapon, drenched and exposed, the terrifying edge she'd held in the cab seemed to dissipate. Back in the relative sanctuary of my truck, I thumbed the locks with a decisive click. She was a furious, rain-smeared silhouette, pounding on the passenger window, her screams muted by the glass and the storm. Ignoring her, I slammed the rig into gear, merging back onto the highway, leaving Linda a shrinking, raging dot in the rearview mirror. I drove straight to the next truck stop, the fluorescent glare of its gas station a stark contrast to the primal darkness I'd just escaped. Inside, my hands still shaking, I called the Texas Department of Public Safety. I laid it all out. Linda, the knife, the median. I gave them her description, the approximate location. The trooper, his voice calm despite the urgency, assured me they'd send a unit, though he warned she might already be gone, whisked away by unseen accomplices. Then came the chilling postscript. 3 other incidents in the last month, all in that same stretch of highway. Female hitchhikers, robbery, carjacking. 1 driver found beaten, his load gone. Another vanished without a trace, truck and all. My blood ran cold, the horror of what could you have been a heavy weight in my gut. They asked me to identify her from photos, and that's when I saw her real face, stripped of its deceptive vulnerability. Rebecca Thornton. A file filled with armed robbery, assault, kidnapping. She was part of a crew, a predator who used the oldest trick in the book, the damsel in distress. I never found out if they caught her that night. Part of me doesn't want to know. All that matters is, I survived. And I learned a lesson etched in fear. Never pick up another hitchhiker. Ever. Sometimes when I drive through that same desolate stretch of Highway 287, the phantom ache of that night resurfaces. How many others fell for it? How many weren't as lucky as I was? The worst part isn't the physical threat. It's what they stole from me that night. They didn't just threaten my life. They robbed me of trust. After 12 years on the road, hauling everything from furniture to live machinery, I used to believe in the kindness of strangers. Now, a crucial part of me is sealed away, just like some of the loads I carry. Most of the time, I know exactly what I'm hauling. I watch it being loaded, or I get detailed paperwork. But sometimes, especially with certain companies, you get what we call a sealed load. The trailer arrives, pre-packed, locked, not to be opened until destination. Usually it's just a security measure, preventing theft. I'd never thought twice about them. Until 3 years ago. Until Route 2 through northern Michigan. It was mid-February, the air a knife edge. I was picking up a sealed trailer outside Flint. The manifest was cryptic. Biological specimens for research purposes. Destination, a lab in Houghton, deep in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. A 6-hour trek through wilderness, but the pay was good, and I needed it. The warehouse itself was unsettling. Tucked away in a forgotten industrial zone, it looked more like a concrete bunker than a shipping hub. No windows, just solid walls and a few loading docks. Security was tighter than a drum. My ID checked twice, 6 forms signed before they'd even show me the trailer. The crew wheeling it out full hazmat suits. A prickle of unease. I asked the supervisor, what kind of specimens warranted this? He just shrugged. Standard procedure. Don't worry. The trailer was a standard 53-foot reefer. Keep it at 38 degree F. They handed me a special phone number for refrigeration issues. I did my pre-trip inspection, everything by the book. Tires good, lights working, seals intact. But as I neared the back doors, a smell hit me. Faint, but distinct. It brought back a memory of my grandfather's hunting cabin after a power outage, deer meat gone bad in the freezer. A sweet, rotten sickness. I mentioned it. The supervisor waved it off. Normal for this cargo. The refrigeration will handle it. I wasn't convinced, but the contracts were signed. I hooked up and started the 6-hour run north. The first few hours hummed by. Through Saginaw, Bay City, then northwest on Route 10. February in Michigan. Overcast, cold, snow patches clinging to the ground. The trailer tracked true, fridge holding its temperature. My CB crackled with the usual trucker complaints, a comforting drone of normalcy. It was around 4 p.m. when I turned onto Route 2, aiming for the Upper Peninsula. This is where Michigan sheds its skin. Towns and farms dissolve into an endless tapestry of forest. In winter, as dusk gathers, it feels ancient and desolate, a place where things can go missing. I knew the route, so I wasn't worried. Not yet. An hour into Route 2, as the sun began its descent, the first sound broke the silence. A thump from the trailer, something heavy shifting. Not unheard of with poorly secured cargo. But then it happened again, more deliberate this time, like something was hitting. The walls from the inside. I grabbed the CB, tried the special number. Nothing. No signal. I was in the middle of nowhere, cell coverage a myth. I decided to pull over at the next rest area, find a payphone. The thumping continued, growing in frequency, in violence. Whatever was back there, it was agitated. Was it live animals? Lab animals, perhaps? That would explain the smell, the secrecy. The growing unease in my gut twisted tighter. 10 miles down the road, a small rest area appeared. Gravel, picnic tables, an outhouse. No payphone. But I had to stop. The thumping had become a frantic crescendo. I worried about the refrigeration unit. I parked at the far end, away from the few other cars. Dark was falling fast, the temperature plummeting. Flashlight in hand, I walked back to the trailer. The smell hit me again, a sickening wave. Stronger now, not just the sweet rot, but something else. Wet dog, ammonia. I walked alongside the trailer, listening. For a moment, silence. Then, as I reached the back doors, a sound that froze me. Not thumping, not banging. Scratching. Long, deliberate scrapes. Claws dragging across metal from multiple points inside the trailer, growing more frantic. Whatever was in there, it wasn't just moving. It was trying to get out. The incessant scratching against the trailer wall, a frantic, desperate rhythm, became a drumbeat against my own pulse. I leaned closer, ear pressed to the cold metal, straining to discern the other sounds. A faint, unnerving clicking, and something perilously close to a whimper. A knot of dread cinched in my gut. This wasn't normal cargo behavior. My mind, a reluctant accomplice, began cataloging the chilling possibilities. Illegal animal trafficking, something far more sinister. The instinct to call the police was swift, a beacon of normalcy in the gathering disquiet. But as I turned to head for my cab, the scratching abruptly ceased. The trailer fell utterly silent, a vacuum of sound more terrifying than the clamor that preceded it. Standing there, swallowed by the creeping dusk, only the sigh of wind through the pines and the distant highway hum broke the oppressive stillness. Then, the smell intensified. Not just from the trailer now, but all around me, a thick metallic tang that clung to every breath, suggesting whatever was inside had somehow gotten out. My flashlight beam cut frantic arcs through the gloom. Trees, snow, my truck, a mere 50 feet away. Nothing unusual, yet a primal urge propelled me toward the cab. 20 feet in, a deep, guttural sound tore through the quiet. A growl so profound it bordered on a roar, unlike any animal I'd ever known. It clawed at me from the direction of my trailer, stripping away any pretense of composure. I scrambled into my truck, fumbling with the lock as if it could seal off the terror. Hands shaking, I jammed the key into the ignition, the engine roaring to life, a blessed counterpoint to the silence. I threw the rig into gear, never once glancing in the rearview mirror, just tearing away from that rest area onto Route 2, leaving the nightmare in my wake. For the next hour, I pushed the truck, the dark, winding road a blur. The trailer behind me was now an unnerving tomb of silence, no thumping, no scratching, yet the stench remained. It seeped into the cab, a corrosive presence, even with windows sealed and air recirculation off, turning my stomach with its sickening sweetness. 30 miles shy of Hton, the world began to spin. The smell, now a suffocating cloud, made my head swim. I pulled over into another rest area, this one a brightly lit oasis with other trucks dotted around like silent guardians. Safety in numbers, I hoped, as I stumbled out to check the trailer again. The odor hit me with physical force, and there, seeping from beneath the trailer doors, was a dark, viscous liquid. In the sodium glow of the lamps, it looked black. But my flashlight beam cut through the deception, revealing a dreadful, dark red. In that sickening revelation, the truth hit me with brutal clarity. Not biological specimens, not lab animals. Something had died, and was now decomposing, a grotesque secret bleeding onto the asphalt. Nausea churned, then erupted. I barely made it to the bushes before I threw up everything in my stomach. Returning, hollow and trembling, I found another driver by my truck. An older man, perhaps in his 60s, his face etched with concern. "You got a problem there, son?" he asked, his gaze fixed on the crimson pool. "That does not look good." I mumbled about a sealed load, about things gone wrong. He shook his head, a seasoned sage in the dim light. "Son, I have been driving truck for 40 years, and I have seen just about everything, but I have never seen anything leak like that from a legitimate shipment. You need to call the authorities right now." His satellite phone was my lifeline. The Michigan State Police dispatcher's voice was firm, almost a command. "Stay put. Do not open the trailer under any circumstances." Units were en route, state police and environmental quality. 30 minutes later, the flashing lights arrived, followed by the surreal sight of a hazmat team. They ordered me to park 100 yards away, their figures in full protective gear, moving with chilling purpose toward my trailer. Through binoculars, I watched as they finally breached the doors. Even from that distance, I saw it, the hazmat team members recoiling, a collective visceral flinch. Whatever was inside was so horrific, it stunned even these professionals, prepared for the worst. For 2 agonizing hours, they documented, sampled, their movements methodical, until finally a state police detective approached. He wouldn't offer specifics, only that it wasn't biological specimens for research. It was, he said, the remains of multiple large animals, illegally slaughtered, transported without permits or proper refrigeration. The company that hired me, he added, was already under investigation. But it was his next detail that lodged in my mind like a shard of ice. The scratches, Fresh, he said, etched into the inside walls, as if made during transport. How? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. If they were already dead. He offered only the cold comfort of an ongoing investigation. I never saw a dime for that job. The company vanished weeks later, swallowed by the shadows of illegal wildlife trafficking, the detective theorized. But that didn't explain the sounds, the scratches, the desperate struggle to escape a sealed tomb. I quit the next day, trading the nightmares for guaranteed legitimate cargo. Never again would I take a sealed load, not for any sum. The horrors that stalked my sleep were proof enough. Sometimes, late nights on empty roads, the question clawed at me. Were they really dead? Or was something alive, trapped, during those 6 hours on the road? The scratching sounds, I knew, would haunt me until my dying day. And I prayed I'd never find out what made them. 10 years on, the road is home. I thought I knew every truck stop, every greasy spoon diner, every stretch of asphalt between Atlanta and Savannah. Highway 80, my regular artery, I'd driven 200 times. Yet what happened last October still unravels me, still injects itself into my darkest dreams. It was a routine haul, paper products from a mill outside Mon, destined for Savannah. 4 hours usually. But this day had been cursed from the start. A late load, construction delays, then my truck's electrical system shorting, the dashboard lights flickering like a dying pulse. By 11 that night, I was nearing the halfway point, running on fumes, literally. My fuel gauge hovered just above empty. Most truck stops shut their fuel islands at midnight. Panic began to prickle. Then a sign. Truck Plaza, 24 hours, an arrow pointing right. I'd never seen it before, which struck me as impossibly strange on a route I knew so intimately. But desperation won. I took the exit, following signs down a narrow 2-lane road flanked by whispering pine woods. The truck stop materialized 2 miles in, a beacon in the darkness. Relief, sharp and sudden, washed over me. It was a decent-sized place, maybe 20 parking spots, a full-service restaurant beckoning with warm light. Other trucks were already parked, a silent fraternity. It all looked reassuringly normal. I pulled up to a pump, the engine falling silent. The pumps looked old but functional. I headed inside, ready to prepay, a late-night ritual at most stops. Inside, the first tremor of unease. The decor was stuck in a time warp, wood-paneled walls, orange carpet, and ancient cash registers with their clunky buttons and mechanical displays. Behind the counter, a middle-aged woman, her beehive hairdo and heavy makeup straight out of a forgotten film reel. "Evening, honey," she chirped, a smile that seemed genuine enough. "What can I do for you?" I explained my need for fuel, produced my company credit card. She took it, turning it over in her hands as if examining an archaeological artifact. "Sorry, sweetheart, but we only take cash," she said, her voice still pleasant. "There is an ATM over by the restaurant if you need to get some money." Every fiber of my being screamed that this was wrong. Every truck stop in America, especially those catering to commercial rigs, took company fuel cards. Yet, I needed the fuel. I turned toward the ATM. The ancient ATM glowed, a sickly green screen in the dim truck stop light, its buttons yellowed and cracked like old teeth. When my card slid in, it let out a series of wounded electronic chirps, then grudgingly spat out the cash. Fuel paid, I walked back to my rig, the air still carrying the cold bite of the early morning. I started pumping, half listening to the diesel gurgling, and glanced around the lot. That's when the first chill set in. Every truck parked there was a relic, not just well-kept antiques, but genuine fossils from a bygone era. The sharp angles of a '79 Peterbilt, its chrome stacks gleaming under the mercury vapor lamps. An early '80s Kenworth in a paint scheme I hadn't seen since I was a kid. CB antennas bristled like mechanical whiskers, adorned with accessories long vanished from dealer catalogs. It felt less like a truck stop and more like stepping onto a forgotten movie set from 40 years ago. Finished fueling, I needed coffee. A warm anchor before another long haul. The restaurant interior was even more disorienting. Red vinyl booths, a jukebox softly playing tinny 70s rock, waitresses in starchy aprons and uniforms from another world. The menu, hand-scrawled on a chalkboard, listed prices that made me blink. Coffee 50 cents, burgers $2, pie $1.50. I slid onto a stool at the counter and ordered a coffee from a waitress whose face was young, perhaps in her 30s, but her hair and makeup were jarringly out of time. Looking around, a knot tightened in my stomach. Every patron seemed cut from the same cloth. Men in trucker caps emblazoned with logos of companies I was sure had folded decades ago. Women with gravity-defying hair and clothes straight out of a vintage catalog. The conversations swirling around me were even stranger. Fuel prices. 80 cents a gallon, muttered with indignation, while I'd just paid over $3. CB channels and trucking regulations I'd never encountered. One man was discussing a freight run for a company I knew had been absorbed and rebranded back in the 90s. It felt like I'd stumbled into some elaborate, meticulously staged historical reenactment, except everyone was acting as if it were utterly normal. When I tried to pay with modern bills, the waitress frowned, holding a $20 note as if it were counterfeit. "Do you have anything smaller, honey?" she asked, her voice flat. I left a crumpled 5 on the counter and practically bolted for the door. As I reached the exit, a driver from a nearby booth spoke, his voice low but cutting through the diner's hum. "That new girl sure is dressed funny. Look at them clothes she's wearing. And that truck of hers, I have never seen anything like it." He was talking about me. My Freightliner was a 2019 model, contemporary but hardly remarkable. My clothes were just jeans and a company shirt. Yet in this place, I was the anomaly. I hurried back to my rig, the strange unease turning into a cold adrenaline rush. As I began my pre-trip inspection, an older man approached, his flannel shirt and forgotten company logo on his cap completing the picture. He circled my truck, his gaze lingering on the sleek lines, the unfamiliar tech. "That's a real nice rig you got there," he said, his voice slow, curious. "What year is that Freightliner? I've never seen one with all them fancy electronics." "It's a 2019, I managed, my throat suddenly dry. He let out a disbelieving laugh. 2019? Come on now, girl. Quit pulling my leg. It's only 1983. They don't make trucks like this yet." My heart hammered against my ribs. 1983. I knew it was October 2023. His truck, that 70s Peterbilt, looked brand new. Suddenly, the pieces clicked into place, forming a terrifying, impossible mosaic. I had stumbled into a pocket of time. Either I'd spiraled backward, or this place was frozen, or something far stranger was at play. "I have to go," I mumbled, scrambling into my cab. My hands trembled as I fired the engine, slamming it into gear. I peeled out of that truck stop faster than I'd ever driven with a full load, a desperate need to escape the anachronistic horror gripping me. The 2 miles back to Highway 80 stretched endlessly. When my tires finally hit the interstate, the world snapped back into focus. Modern trucks, contemporary billboards, familiar traffic. I was back in 2023. I drove straight through to Savannah, delivered my load, and immediately called my dispatcher, relaying the surreal encounter. He laughed, suggesting I was either joking or utterly exhausted. When I insisted, he just told me to get some sleep. The next morning, I called the Georgia Department of Transportation. I described the truck stop's exact location, but they had no record of it. Just woods and private property. The following week, I drove back. I found the exit, turned down the 2-lane road winding through pine. But where the truck stop should have been, there was nothing. Just empty forest, a barren field. No building, no pumps, no trace. Other drivers on Highway 80 mostly shook their heads. But one old-timer, his eyes crinkling, said something that made my blood run cold. Pinewoods Plaza, he mused. Used to be a popular spot back in the 80s. Burned down in 84. Restaurant fire, spread to the pumps. Took out a few drivers sleeping in their cabs, they said. Worst truck stop disaster in Georgia history. Place has been cursed ever since. I've never found official records of that fire, nor anyone to corroborate the story. Yet I can't explain what happened. I know what I saw, what I felt. I was in a truck stop from 1983, surrounded by ghosts of time. Since that night, I've rerouted, taking Highway 16 instead of 80, adding an hour to my drive. I can't bring myself to pass that exit again, especially after dark. Other drivers think I'm crazy. Maybe I am. But I know what was real. Sometimes, late at night, traversing those rural stretches, I wonder if other places like Pinewoods Plaza exist. Places where time stutters, where past and present blur. I just pray I never find another. Sound fades to static, then the low hum of a CB radio. I've logged 14 years on the road, and in that time, I've heard every kind of story, every whispered secret over the CB. Drivers griping about traffic, tipping each other off to speed traps, warning of blizzards, or just breaking the silence during those endless, solitary miles. The CB is our lifeline, a thread connecting us across vast distances. But 2 years ago, on Interstate 94 in North Dakota, I realized that some voices, once heard, can unravel everything. I was hauling farm equipment from Bismarck to Minneapolis, a run through some of the most desolate country America offers. I-94 through North Dakota is a ruler straight line slicing through an ocean of wheat and corn, farmhouses and grain elevators, mere specks on the horizon. In September, the fields buzz with harvest, but this was late November. Everything was dead, brown under a bruised sky, heavy with the promise of snow. I'd been driving since pre-dawn, and by Jamestown, dusk was gathering. The weather was turning mean, a cold wind battering my trailer, the first snowflakes flicking against the windshield. I was tuned to Channel 19, hoping for intel on the road ahead, when a voice cut through the static, sending an immediate shiver down my spine. Well, 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 it drawled, a distinct sneer even through the crackle. Look what we got here. Montana Rick, rolling eastbound in that pretty blue Peterbilt. How you doing tonight, Rick? The voice knew my name, knew the color of my rig, which meant whoever was speaking could see me. I checked my mirrors, scanned the sparse traffic. A few cars, one other truck, a half-mile back, barely a shadow. This is Montana Rick. Who am I talking to? The words echoed into the crackle of the CB. A pause stretched, then a laugh slithered across the airwaves, a sound that iced its way down my spine. You do not need to know who I am, Rick, but I know all about you. His voice, calm and chilling, unfurled each detail like a pre-written confession. I know you are hauling John Deere equipment to Minneapolis. I know you live in Billings with your wife, Sandra, and your 2 kids. I know you drive the same route about twice a month. I've been watching you for a while now. My heart hammered against my ribs, an insistent drumbeat of dread. This wasn't some random trucker looking for a chat. This was a predator who had meticulously studied my routines, cataloged my life, and most terrifyingly, gathered information about my family. I fought to steady my voice. I think you have got me confused with someone else, friend. I do not know what you are talking about. The laugh returned, sharper, nastier. Oh, I got the right guy, Rick. I know exactly who you are, and I know exactly where you are right now. The breath hitched in my throat. Hurry! Marker 258 eastbound on Oozer 94. You just passed that grain elevator about 3 mi back. Your truck is looking a little dirty, Rick. When was the last time you washed it? My gaze snapped to the odometer. Marker 258. He was dead accurate. And the grime on my rig, a testament to earlier construction zones, suddenly felt like a brand. Whoever this was, he wasn't just watching me, he was seeing me, right now, through some unseen lens. I snatched up the CB again. Look, I do not know who you are or what you want, but you need to stop this right now. You are making me uncomfortable. Uncomfortable. The word dripped with mockery. You have not seen uncomfortable yet, Rick. I'm just getting started. You see, I have been following truckers like you for months now, learning about them, studying their habits, figuring out the best ways to get to them. And you, Rick, you have become my favorite. My eyes darted to my mirrors, scanning frantically for any vehicle that didn't quite fit, any face that lingered too long. The truck behind me was too distant to make out a license plate, but a couple of cars hummed along, generic, anonymous. The chilling truth of I-94 hit me. On this endless stretch, binoculars could bridge a mile, making anyone a silent observer. What do you want from me? I demanded, the question raspy. I want you to be afraid, Rick. I want you to know that someone is watching you, someone who knows where you live and where your family lives. I want you to understand that you are not safe out there on that highway, and neither are Sandra and the kids back home in Billings. The mention of Sandra and the kids, their names spoken by this phantom, ignited a white-hot rage. My knuckles blanched as I gripped the microphone. You stay away from my family, you sick freak. I'm calling the police right now. Go ahead and call them, Rick. Tell them some voice on the CB radio is scaring you. See how seriously they take it. His voice held a disarming confidence. Besides, what are they going to do? I could be in any one of these vehicles around you, or I could be 10 miles away with a good radio setup. You will never find me. He was right. We both knew it. A CB's range stretched for miles under good conditions, and a powerful setup could cloak a user in a vast, untraceable area. Still, hope, however thin, pushed me. I dialed 911, explaining the chilling encounter to a North Dakota State Patrol dispatcher. She was sympathetic but confirmed my fear. No license plate, no specific vehicle description, nothing they could do. Her only suggestion was to switch channels and avoid using my handle. I tried channel 17. Within 5 minutes, the voice was back. Channel 17. Now, Rick, you think that's going to help? I told you I have been studying you. I know all your habits. You always switch to 17 when 19 gets too crowded. You're so predictable. This wasn't merely a follower. This was a shadow that had been intertwined with my life for months, dissecting my CB conversations, mapping my patterns, absorbing my family's details. I flipped through 21, then 12, then 6. Each time, within minutes, he found me. He was scanning, listening, an invisible spider at the center of a technological web, dedicating all his time to my torment. You cannot hide from me, Rick, he purred as he locked onto channel 6. I know every frequency you use. I have been recording your conversations for months. I know about that load of electronics you hauled to Denver last month. I know about the speeding ticket you got in Wyoming. I know about that truck stop waitress in Iowa that you have been flirting with. The last comment struck me like a physical blow. A waitress at a Flying J in Iowa. Harmless flirting, perhaps, for a lonely man on the road, but a shameful secret I'd told no one. The realization that he knew, that he had observed this intimate, hidden part of my life, was a fresh wave of horror. He had been watching far more closely than I had ever imagined. You're starting to understand now, are not you, Rick? The voice continued, a dark current flowing through the static. I know everything about you, your roots, your schedule, your habits, your secrets. And now, I'm going to start using that information. My voice, when I spoke again, was a tremor. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to suffer, Rick. I want you to be afraid every time you get in that truck. I want you to wonder if tonight is the night I decide to pay a visit to Sandra and the kids. I want you to know that someone out there hates you enough to destroy your life." "Why?" I asked. The word ripped from my throat. "What did I do to you?" A long, heavy silence. Then, when the voice returned, it had shed its mocking tone. It was quieter, sharper, brimming with a raw, ancient rage. "You killed my brother." The words hit me with the force of a physical impact. "I never killed anyone. You have got the wrong person. Route 2 in Montana, 18 months ago. You were westbound. My brother was eastbound on his motorcycle. You crossed the center line to avoid a deer and hit him head on. Remember now, Rick." The memory flashed, sudden and brutal. A storm, rain lashing the windshield, visibility near zero. A deer, a sudden shadow, a swerve. The impact, a dull thud I had dismissed as my imagination, had left no visible damage on the truck, no trace of the deer. I had driven on, convinced I'd missed it entirely. "I never saw a motorcycle," I choked out, desperation clawing at my throat. "I never knew I hit anyone." "Of course you did not stop," he snarled, contempt seeping through the airwaves. "You just kept driving, left my brother dying on the side of the road in the rain. It took the police 3 hours to find him, and by then it was too late. But they found paint chips from your truck on his bike and tire tracks that matched your rig. They had your license number, Rick." My hands were shaking now, a violent tremor that spread through my chest. The police. Weeks after the phantom collision, they had come to my house, drilling me about my whereabouts. I had told them the truth as I knew it, ignorant of any accident. The investigation had fizzled, and I'd buried the unease, assuming it was over. "Swear to you, I never knew I hit anyone," I pleaded. "I thought I missed the deer. It was dark and raining, and I could not see anything. If I had known someone was hurt, I would have stopped." "You are a liar, Rick. You killed my brother and drove away. Now I'm going to make you pay." For the next 2 hours, as I hurtled through the darkness toward Minneapolis, the conversation continued. He'd vanish, then reappear on a different channel, whispering new threats, new damning details of my life, promises of what he planned for me and my family. He knew the names of my children's schools, my home address, the make and model of Sandra's car. He had been preparing for this, a slow-burning hate, for months. As Minneapolis drew closer, a sliver of hope ignited. Surely the urban sprawl would break his signal. But as I pulled into the TA on Highway 10, the familiar crackle shattered my illusion. "Pulling into the TA on Highway 10, Rick. Same place you always stop when you come to Minneapolis. Room 237 at the motel next door, right? Same room you had last time you were here." He was right again. Not just my routes, but my accommodation patterns. This man had become my shadow, anticipating my every move. I parked, called the police again from the truck stop office. This time, the Minneapolis authorities listened with more gravity, especially after hearing about the motorcycle accident. 2 officers arrived, took my report, and suggested I find another motel. But even in a different room, with the CB off, the feeling of being watched was a cold hand on my neck. Every passing car seemed suspicious, every face in the lobby, a potential tormentor. Sleep was a luxury I could not afford that night. The harassment became a relentless siege, spanning 6 months. The voice would materialize on the CB 2 or 3 times a week, each time with fresh threats, newly unearthed facets of my life. The calls began, silent hang-ups when Sandra answered. Then, the descriptions. My wife and children, their clothes, their routes to school and work. Finally, the photographs. My family, unwittingly captured at the grocery store, the gas station, the kids' baseball games, mailed directly to my house. A chilling tableau of an invaded life. The voice crackled over the CB, cutting through the vast, impersonal hum of I-94. "Tonight is the night, Rick. I'm done playing games. You pay for what you did to my brother. 6 months. 6 months since that first haunting whisper. 6 months of ghost pursuits across state lines. The elusive predator always a phone call, a triangulation point, a single terrifying move ahead. But this time, the hunted was ready. This time, Rick was bait. For months, the FBI had been turning Rick's truck into a mobile trap. A discreet tracking system nestled beneath the dashboard. A special radio, his lifeline, not just for broadcasting, but for recording, for pinpointing. The voice again, raw with vengeance, pouring from the speaker. Rick, heart thudding, activated the tracker. He began to talk, to question, to spin a verbal web, keeping the hunter on the line just long enough. The FBI, miles away but impossibly close, traced the signal, 15 miles from Rick's position. State police swarmed. They converged on a single dusty pickup truck, its powerful CB radio humming, its surveillance gear bristling. Inside, Robert Kowalski. Arrested. They searched his truck, then his home. The grim harvest, months of photographs, recordings, meticulously written notes detailing Rick's every move, every routine. Kowalski hadn't just stalked Rick, he'd ensnared other drivers, blaming them for phantom accidents, imagined slights. The police called it one of the most exhaustive stalking cases they'd ever witnessed. The trial unveiled the genesis of the terror. A motorcycle accident. Robert's brother, gone, swallowed by a storm and a truck collision. But the investigation had never named Rick. Yet, in Robert's fractured mind, Rick was responsible. Over a year, he'd meticulously spun his web of revenge. Convicted of stalking, harassment, terroristic threats, Robert was sentenced to 5 years. 5 years. A victory on paper, but the damage was deeper, a raw wound festering in Rick's soul. He couldn't drive those same routes. The shadow of Robert, or someone like him, would forever ride shotgun. The CB, once a beacon of camaraderie, now whispered suspicion, each voice a potential enemy. The crushing weight of that unanswered question, was he truly responsible for a death on a rainy night 18 months ago, drove him from the open road. 6 months after the trial, he swapped the rumble of a long haul for the local routes of a construction company. He missed the freedom, yes, but not the suffocating fear of unseen eyes, of lives meticulously catalogued, twisted into weapons. The true horror, Rick knew, wasn't just the threats, but the chilling certainty that the road was full of Robert Kowalskis, lurking, waiting, transforming the very tools of connection into instruments of terror. The technology that made trucking bearable could also make it terrifying. 11 years Rick had been driving, charting endless miles, believing he'd seen every warehouse, every loading dock, every industrial facility in the country. From colossal distribution centers to humble barn-converted operations, he'd hauled and delivered. But an industrial facility outside Bakersfield 3 years ago shattered that illusion, stamping itself onto his nightmares, a visceral reminder that some cargo should never, ever be moved. It was late October. A delivery of agricultural equipment near Fresno had just wrapped. His dispatcher called, the offer dangling like a mirage. A pickup that same evening, double his usual rate. College tuition for his daughter. He took it, knowing it meant driving straight through the night. The pickup, Kern Valley Industrial Storage, 30 miles southeast of Bakersfield. An unknown name, but California's industrial landscape shifted constantly. The manifest read, processed agricultural products for Phoenix. Routine enough. He arrived at 11 p.m., expecting bright lights, bustling docks. Instead, his rig rumbled down a narrow dirt road, ending at an isolated, decaying warehouse, surrounded by an ocean of empty, moonlit fields. Rust stained the metal siding, weeds clawed through asphalt cracks. No company signs, just a small, almost clandestine placard, KVI storage. 2 pickups and a silent, refrigerated truck, seemingly abandoned, were the only other vehicles. A single floodlight fought the darkness, casting the loading dock in a sickly, yellow glow. Shadows moved, several men. A cold prickle ran down Rick's spine. This was wrong, but the miles, the money, the tuition. He backed his trailer, engine purring, and stepped into the unsettling quiet. The men on the dock weren't typical warehouse workers. Dark clothes, heavy gloves despite the mild night. They avoided his gaze. When he asked to check in, a silent gesture directed him to a small, annex office. Inside, the surreal deepened. Metal desks, filing cabinets, relics from the 70s. Walls plastered with incomprehensible charts. Behind a desk, a nervous, thin man in his 50s introduced himself as Mr. Patterson. Documents piled up. Rick tried to read, to understand, but Patterson rushed him, his voice tight, fixated on finishing before dawn. "What exactly am I hauling?" Rick asked, the paperwork still maddeningly vague. "Processed meat products," Patterson said, not meeting his eyes, a clipboard his refuge. "Specialty items for restaurants in Phoenix. Nothing to worry about." Rick requested to inspect the load before sealing, standard procedure. Patterson refused, citing health department regulations. He assured Rick of proper packaging, temperature control, a steady 35 degrees needed. As they spoke, the warehouse throbbed with a mechanical roar, heavy machinery struggling, but beneath it, other sounds. Scraping, thumping, something that sounded almost like voices, or crying. Rick asked about the noise. Patterson, calm, too calm, explained multiple orders, night work, equipment volume. 2 hours. That's how long it took to load a single trailer, a suspicious eternity. Rick waited in the office, the disquiet growing. A strong, sickly chemical smell permeated the air, like bleach and something foully organic. Workers moved in and out of a section blocked off by heavy plastic sheeting. Distinct machinery noises emanated from behind it, but it was Patterson's phone calls that truly twisted Rick's gut. Whispers. Brief, coded conversations. He heard phrases. "Processing complete on batch 7. Disposal truck arrives at 3. Sanitization of Area 4 needed before morning." Not the language of meat processing, not normal business. Around 1 a.m., the trailer was finally loaded. Rick signed the last papers. Walking back to his truck, he passed the plastic sheeting, a fleeting gap. He looked, and his blood turned to ice. Bright lights illuminated large metal tables, on them unanimal parts, human limbs, torsos, people in surgical scrubs, medical instruments, containers of organs. The realization slammed into him, illegal organ harvesting. Rick forced himself to walk, normal, steady. His hands trembled as he started the engine. Workers sealed his trailer, handed him the manifest. He drove, not fast enough to betray his terror, but fast enough to escape. Out of sight, deep in the desolate fields, he pulled over. Dialed 911. The Kern County Sheriff's dispatcher listened, her voice grim, serious. But Rick couldn't turn back. He had to continue, she said. Detectives would meet him in Barstow. He was bait again. The next 4 hours stretched into an eternity. The hum of the refrigeration unit was a predator's purr in the dark. I drove through the night with a sickness coiling in my gut, knowing every mile that my trailer held not just evidence, but likely the shredded remnants of human lives. Each glance in the rearview mirror, at the hulking metal box I was dragging behind me, churned my stomach. What exactly was I keeping cold back there? The truck stop materialized out of the pre-dawn gloom, a small island of fluorescent pallor. Detectives were already waiting, their faces grim, flanked by a coroner's team and a trio of FBI agents whose very stance screamed authority. The air thickened as the trailer doors swung open. Even these hardened professionals flinched, a collective intake of breath visible in the dim light. Inside, rows upon rows of coolers and unmarked containers sat, each a receptacle for unspeakable horrors. Human organs, tissue samples, body parts meticulously harvested and packaged for transport lay within. "It's bigger than you think," an FBI agent murmured later, his voice tight, explaining that I'd stumbled into the gears of a massive, illegal organ trafficking network. Bakersfield was just one NODA processing hub where victims were butchered, their parts prepped for cold storage and shipment across the country. My own rig, a familiar extension of myself, had been unwittingly pressed into service, ferrying death to a Phoenix medical facility, a sister site in this gruesome enterprise. The investigation that exploded from my tip was a shockwave. Over 20 arrests swept through California, Arizona, and Nevada. The Bakersfield warehouse, raided the very next day, yielded sickening proof. Dozens of victims, the report stated, murdered for their organs. Homeless individuals, undocumented immigrants, people easily made to disappear. But what truly haunted me, a cold claw gripping my chest, was the revelation that my company, my trucks, had been used before. The FBI claimed they'd been hiring independent drivers for months, hauling processed meat products. I was simply the first to look too closely, to feel the wrongness of it. Other drivers, they speculated, had likely delivered similar macabre cargo, oblivious. The psychological footprint of that night never faded. For months, I'd bolt upright in bed, slick with sweat, the image of metal tables and people in scrubs seared into my mind. I'd replay the victims whose remains I'd carried, wondering if their families would ever know. A phantom complicity gnawed at me, despite my ignorance. After the trials, where several defendants were sentenced to life, I took 6 months off. When I finally returned to the road, I switched companies, now only hauling for faces I knew, refusing anything refrigerated, anything processed, any pickup from an unfamiliar facility. The darkest truth lurked just beneath the surface. Other operations, just like it, were almost certainly still running, using legitimate truckers as unwitting cogs. Every time I saw a driver taking a sealed load from an anonymous warehouse, a cold dread would prickle. Do they know? These criminal syndicates polished their operations, making everything appear above board. Most drivers would never suspect. The nightmares still come, of Bakersfield, of plastic sheeting, the hum of unseen machinery, but mostly of the victims, their lives extinguished for profit. I carry their memory, a silent passenger, every time I climb into my cab. The FBI agent told me I'd saved lives, that I should be proud. But pride felt alien, contaminated by the thought of my unwitting participation in such raw evil. The road, I learned, held dangers beyond bad weather or reckless drivers. The true menace could be the cargo itself, and the unseen hands that hired us to haul it. This brutal awakening taught me that unimaginable horrors exist just beneath the veneer of normalcy, hiding behind the guise of legitimate business. It taught me that a truck driver's vigilance extends beyond the highway. It reaches into the heart of the load, the soul of the pickup. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Better to walk away than to carry a burden that will haunt you forever. I will never forget the chilling faces at that loading dock, the cloying smell of that warehouse, the sight of what lay on those metal tables. But I also carry the quiet triumph that one person speaking up can disrupt so much darkness. The victims deserved justice, and I was, however painfully, a part of delivering it. 9 years I've traced the veins of the Appalachian Mountains, convinced I knew every road, every pass, every shortcut in West Virginia. The mountains are tricky, especially in bad weather, but their stark beauty always called me back. Then came a foggy November night, 2 years ago, when the mountains showed me roads unseen by maps, places that defied all logic. I was hauling furniture from Martinsburg to Charleston, a route I'd driven 50 times. A routine 3-hour run, usually a straight shot, I-81 south to I-64 west. That night, though, fate seemed to conspire. An accident on I-81 snared traffic. Then I-64 forced a detour, adding an hour. By midnight near Charleston, I was woefully behind schedule, and a thick fog had swallowed the road, visibility dropping to 20 feet. My GPS, usually my steadfast guide, chirped, "Take the next right for the fastest route." The turn appeared abruptly, onto a road I'd never noticed, despite countless passes. It was a narrow 2-lane mountain track, stripped of street signs or markers by the fog. A prickle of unease ran down my spine the moment my tires hit the asphalt. The pavement was ancient, crisscrossed with deep cracks and potholes, speaking of years of neglect. No guardrails lined the edges, a terrifying omission given the steep drop-offs I knew lay beyond the mist. Most unnerving of all, no other vehicles. An unsettling silence for a midnight road, even a back one. The fog thickened as I climbed, blurring the edges of the pavement, the world shrinking to the tunnel of my headlights. My GPS insisted I was on track, yet its estimated arrival time danced erratically. 30 minutes, then an hour and 15, then 45. It seemed as lost as I was. After 20 minutes of this strange journey, lights bled through the fog ahead. Not headlights, but stationary glows coming from buildings. Cresting a small rise, I found myself gazing down into what appeared to be a mountain town, nestled in a valley. The town defied everything I knew about West Virginia. Buildings looked frozen in the early 1900s, wooden storefronts, houses illuminated by gas lamps instead of electricity. People moved through the streets, though it was long past midnight. Horse-drawn wagons stood beside strangely antique automobiles. My first thought, a movie set, a living history exhibit. But as I rolled down the main street, the illusion shattered. These were not actors. They went about their business entering shops, talking on corners, utterly oblivious to the guttural rumble of my modern truck. I pulled up to what looked like a gas station, hoping for directions. It was a relic, pulled from the 1920s, with old-fashioned pumps and a sign advertising gasoline at 12 cents a gallon. A man in overalls and a cloth cap emerged, his accent unlike any I'd ever heard in modern West Virginia. "Evening, stranger," he said, his gaze lingering on my cab, full of curious wonder. "That's quite a machine you got there. What kind of engine does it run on?" "Diesel," I answered, and his face contorted in utter bewilderment. He'd never heard the word. When I asked about the town's name and how to get back to Interstate 64, he scratched his head. "This here is Millbrook," he drawled. "Been here all my life, and there ain't no interstate road anywhere around these parts. You must be lost, son." The voice was kind, but when I asked what year it was, the man's expression curdled from confused to concerned. "It's 1923, of course. Are you feeling all right, mister? You look a bit peaked." My heart hammered against my ribs, a trapped bird. The truth, cold and sharp, cut through the mountain air. My 2020 Kenworth, an alien behemoth, had somehow rumbled into a town trapped in 1923. I scanned the street. Figures moved like ghosts from a history book, their clothes lifted from faded photographs. Model T Fords, ancient iron beasts, lined the curbs. The architecture, the gas lamps casting their dim, amber glow, even the very scent of the air. A mix of coal smoke and damp earth screamed of a time long past. I mumbled a thank you and scrambled back into my cab, the vinyl cool against my clammy skin. I had to get out, back to my world, and fast. I threw the truck into gear, attempting to retrace my path up the winding road, but a human wall had materialized. A line of townsfolk, their faces grim, stood sentinel across the street. They pointed at my rig, their hushed voices a guttural murmur that amplified my fear. Then, a figure detached itself from the crowd. An older man in a severe black suit and hat, his gait slow, deliberate, approached my driver's side window. I rolled it down, the electric whine anachronistic in the stillness. His eyes, dark and ancient, seemed to bore into my very soul. "You do not belong here," he whispered, his voice thin as a winter wind. "This is not your time, and this is not your place. But now that you are here, you cannot leave." "What do you mean I cannot leave?" My voice, despite my effort, was a strained rasp. "The road only goes one way for people like you," he replied, a grim certainty in his tone. "You can go deeper into our world, but you cannot go back to yours. That is the price of traveling on roads that do not exist in your time." I checked my mirrors. More figures had solidified behind my truck, silent sentinels. No direct threat, but an absolute blockage. I was trapped. The old man tapped on my window again, a soft, insistent rhythm. "There is a way out," he said, his eyes never leaving mine. "But you have to follow the rules. You have to become one of us. Give up your old life and stay here forever. Or you can try to find the other road, the one that leads out of our time. But most people who try that road are never seen again." He gestured towards the far end of town, where the street dissolved into a swirling fog and impenetrable darkness. "That way leads to places that are worse than here, places where time does not work at all, where people get lost between the years and wander forever. But it is your choice." Dread coiled in my stomach. "Stay here, in 1923. Impossible. My family, my life in 2022, a world that was mine. Everything pulled at me." "Thank you," I managed, my voice more steady than I felt. I engaged the transmission, the powerful engine grumbling to life, and drove toward the impossible road. The people of Millbrook watched, a collective sigh in their stillness, their faces etched with disappointment, as if I'd rejected an invitation to join them. The road itself was a nightmare. It twisted and bucked in defiance of all logic, climbing impossibly steep grades only to plummet into terrifying descents that strained my brakes. The fog became a living thing, dense and suffocating, swallowing everything beyond my headlights. My GPS was dead, a blank screen mirroring the void ahead. Hours blurred. My clock behaved erratically, jumping forward, then backward, a fractured reflection of time itself. I rumbled through other phantom communities. One a frontier town straight out of the 1800s, with wooden boardwalks and hitching posts. Another, a more modern vision, but its cars frozen in the 1950s. In each, silent figures emerged to watch my passage, waving, but I never stopped. Fear gnawed at me. To pause was to be snared, to trade one prison for another. Then, a flicker of hope in the endless night. Modern road signs, sharp and bright, piercing the gloom. The pavement, smooth and unbroken, stretched ahead. Rounding a bend, the familiar green shield of Interstate 64 materialized. I was back. I pulled into the first truck stop, the fluorescent lights a garish comfort, and called my dispatcher. 12 hours missing. My GPS had tracked me in non-existent territory. Search and rescue had been looking for a wreckage. I tried to explain, the words tumbling out in a rush, but their faces hardened with disbelief. Hallucination, mental breakdown. The company doctor, finding no physical ailments, prescribed rest. Millbrook has no record. The GPS route, that fateful turn-off, vanished. When I tried to retrace my path weeks later, The entrance to the impossible road was gone. But I know what I saw. I know there are veins of time running through these mountains, roads leading to places and eras that defy all reason, communities trapped, waiting for others to join them. Now every mile driven through the Appalachians is a wary negotiation. Main highways only. No shortcuts. Paper maps tucked under the seat. A tangible shield against the digital void. Other drivers have whispered similar tales. Roads that appear then vanish. Towns out of time. Most dismiss it as exhaustion or mountain folklore. I know better. The most terrifying part, not knowing how many have taken that other road and never returned. How many truckers, officially listed as missing, are still out there, driving endless, impossible loops, searching for a home that may no longer exist. It's my job, my livelihood, to drive these routes. But the sight of fog rolling over the peaks, a GPS suggesting an unfamiliar detour, it all brings back the old man in the black suit, his chilling offer, his warning, roads that only go one way. Sometimes, late at night, I believe I see distant lights that belong to no town on any map, and I wonder if, somewhere between yesterday and today, the people of Millbrook still wait for another lost soul to choose their path. I've been driving truck for 7 years, never once questioned a DOT way station. You see the signs, you stop. An officer waves you in, you comply. It's part of the job. Inconvenient, sometimes costly, but it keeps the road safe. But what happened last year at a remote way station on Highway 97 in Oregon shattered that trust. It showed me that some uniforms conceal a different kind of authority, and some inspections aren't about safety at all. I was hauling a load of lumber from Bend to Sacramento, a route that carves through the wild, stark beauty of the Pacific Northwest. Highway 97, a north-south artery through central Oregon, has long stretches where you're just alone with the juniper and sagebrush, miles of high desert stretching to the horizon. It's the kind of place that amplifies the quiet solitude of the road. It was early December, around 9 p.m. I'd been driving since noon. The air was crisp, the new moon a sliver that left the desert in near-total darkness, pierced only by my headlights. About 40 miles south of Bend, I saw the familiar blue and white signs. Mandatory way station ahead. I'd driven this route 24 times, but I'd never seen a station here. They usually hug major cities or state borders, not the middle of nowhere. Yet, the signs looked utterly official standard DOT logos, the stern warning, all commercial vehicles must stop. As I approached, the floodlights illuminated the way station building, the scale platforms gleaming. A couple of other trucks were already there, and I spotted figures in what looked like DOT uniforms moving about. Everything appeared normal, legitimate. I rolled onto the scale, waiting for the green light to proceed to the inspection area. A man, uniformed in a DOT jacket, carrying a clipboard, approached my truck. He looked professional, his equipment and demeanor mirroring every other officer I'd encountered. The voice on the other end of the radio was clipped, authoritarian. Bay 3, logbook and registration, office inspection. I steered my rig towards the designated spot, a routine I'd performed thousands of times. But as I cut the engine, a flicker of unease snagged me. The office was a temporary structure, more construction trailer than the solid permanent facilities I expected at legitimate way stations. Inside, several men sported DOT uniforms, yet something felt off. They lacked the sharp professionalism of real Department of Transportation officers. Their questions strayed from standard procedure, probing not my driving hours or maintenance logs, but the very essence of my haul. "What exactly are you hauling?" one asked, his gaze lingering on me, despite my bill of lading clearly stating lumber products. I told him it was construction lumber, and he pressed, "Where did you load it? Where are you delivering?" Unsettling questions for a DOT check, which usually focused on safety and driver qualifications. Still, I answered honestly, a quiet dread beginning to coil in my gut. Maybe a special investigation. Another officer chimed in. Do you make this run regularly? What days do you usually travel this highway? Ever carry different types of cargo? The questions felt less like an inspection and more like an interrogation, each one chipping away at my composure. Yet, with nothing to hide, I kept cooperating, the air growing thick with unspoken tension. The inspection dragged on. A normal DOT check lasts 30 to 45 minutes. These men spent over 2 hours. Their hands rifled through my sleeper berth and storage compartments with an unnerving thoroughness, my personal belongings tossed aside. They meticulously examined the lumber, measuring boards, snapping photographs. What truly chilled me was their hushed communication. Genuine DOT officers were typically systematic, transparent. These men whispered, made phone calls with voices too low to decipher. At one point, I saw one speaking into a radio, not with standard law enforcement terminology, but what sounded like coded language. A tendril of cold fear traced my spine. Close to midnight, one of them delivered the pronouncement. We need a more detailed inspection of your cargo. You'll have to wait while we unload and examine every piece. My stomach dropped. Unloading cargo was rare, reserved for specific safety concerns. I demanded their supervisor, but was met with a dismissive wave. Not available. You have no choice. As they began the slow, deliberate work of unloading my trailer, my suspicion solidified into a sickening certainty. No other DOT vehicles were present. Unheard of at a way station. The equipment they used to move my lumber looked like something from a construction site, not the specialized gear of proper inspectors. Peering into their makeshift office, I saw no computers, no official forms, just basic furniture and communication hardware. My heart hammered. I needed to call for help. I hurried back to my truck for my cell. No signal. Not unusual in rural areas, yet the timing felt maliciously precise. My CB radio crackled with static. No other drivers answered on the normal channels. Then 2 of the officers spoke, their voices carrying faintly over the rumble of heavy machinery. Processing the current load, preparing for transfer. A chilling phrase. The buyers in California, usual pickup point near the border. The truth hit me with the force of a physical blow. Not DOT, cargo thieves, a fake way station designed to ensnare and steal. But it got worse. I strained to hear over the drone, and their next words made my blood run cold. Driver situation, disposal protocols. They weren't just stealing my lumber, they were planning to eliminate me. Handled 3 drivers already this month. The desert's a good place to make people disappear. Panic seized me, a cold, hard knot in my chest. These weren't mere thieves, they were killers. My eyes darted to the heavy equipment parked behind the building, a backhoe, its scoop large enough to dig graves. I had to escape, but my truck was blocked, and there were at least 4 armed men. One desperate gamble remained. I walked back to the trailer office, feigning illness. I need to use the bathroom. They pointed to a portable toilet behind the building, a chance to survey their operation. What I saw there would haunt my sleep. 3 abandoned trucks, plates from out of state. One with what looked like bullet holes in the driver's door. Near them, large plastic tarps, dark stains marring their surface. And their radio setup, far more sophisticated than anything a legitimate way station would possess. Equipment for monitoring CB traffic, and what looked like jammers for cell phone signals. This wasn't some impromptu smash and grab. This was a meticulously planned, deadly operation. I knew I had only minutes before they finished unloading my truck and decided my fate. I slipped into my cab, my hands trembling as I slid the key into the ignition. It turned over on the first try. I slammed the truck into gear, roaring straight through the chain-link fence at the back of the facility, crashing into the desert beyond. Shouting erupted behind me, engines sputtering to life. Headlights materialized in my rearview mirror, gaining on me as my rig bounced and lurched across the treacherous desert terrain. My truck wasn't built for this, but adrenaline was my fuel. I pushed forward, following what looked like an old mining road for 20 harrowing minutes until I hit Highway 97, 5 miles south of the fake station. I flagged down the first vehicle I saw, an Oregon State Police patrol car. The trooper's face, bathed in the flashing blue light, was a beacon of hope. I poured out my story. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within an hour, dozens of law enforcement vehicles converged: FBI, Oregon State Police, local sheriff's deputies. But when they reached the location, it was empty. The buildings, the equipment, everything gone. Only tire tracks and the gaping hole where I'd crashed through the fence remained. Yet they found my evidence. 3 abandoned trucks were discovered hidden in a ravine 2 miles away, their drivers all listed as missing persons. The investigation confirmed my horrifying realization. These drivers had been murdered. The FBI revealed they'd been tracking a series of hijackings and disappearances on Highway 97 for over a year. A criminal organization using portable setups, moving like ghosts when law enforcement drew too close, stealing cargo and silencing witnesses. According to the FBI, the lumber I carried saved my life. Its comparatively low value meant they paused, weighed the risk of murder against the haul. Had it been electronics or pharmaceuticals, I would have died that night. The investigation led to the arrest of 7 people, including 2 former DOT employees. Similar operations in Nevada and California were uncovered. The FBI estimated millions stolen, at least 12 drivers murdered over 2 years. During the trial, I learned the grim details. They monitored CB radio to identify valuable loads, jammed signals, and had contingency plans for disposing of drivers in remote desert locations. The experience shattered my old sense of security. Now, I carry multiple communication devices, including a satellite phone that can't be jammed. I've mapped every official way station on my routes. If I see one not on my map, I drive past and report it. And a GPS tracker updates my location every few minutes. The desert had shown me its true face, and I would never drive blind again. The desolate stretch of highway still echoes in my rearview mirror, a constant reminder of the day I almost vanished. Now, every stop, every badge, every flickering sign of authority is filtered through a lens of raw instinct. If something feels off, truly off, a prickle on the back of my neck, a subtle discord in the air, then it probably is off. Real duty officers, the legitimate ones, are predictable in their routine, standard procedures, standard questions, the comforting hum of a well-oiled system. But that day, the questions veered into the unusual, probing about cargo, about routes, about things that had no business being asked. The facility itself, a shoddy replica of officialdom, screamed a silent warning that my gut thankfully received. Better to be suspicious and wrong, I learned, than trusting and dead. The chilling truth is that my experience wasn't isolated. How many others, I wonder, have disappeared on those remote highways, listed officially as missing, when in truth they met a brutal end at the hands of hijackers cloaked in uniforms? How many fake way stations, how many bogus inspection points lie in wait even now, their traps sprung for the next unsuspecting rig? Since that day, the whispers have grown louder, other drivers sharing their own near misses, their own encounters with suspicious checkpoints. Some, like me, drove on, reporting the unsettling locations to authorities. Others stopped, and for some, the road simply ended there, swallowed by the desert. The industry, I believe, has a responsibility to arm its drivers, to sharpen their senses against these unseen threats, to teach them to discern the genuine from the deadly masquerade. I still pilot my rig down Highway 97 regularly, the same asphalt beneath my tires. But now, every way station sign is cross-referenced with my maps, its legitimacy verified before I even consider pulling over. Every interaction with a supposed DOT officer is a silent audit of their questions, their procedures, their very presence. And each time I drive past that empty stretch of desert where the fake station once stood, the memory of what I escaped, how close I came to dissolving into another statistic, is a cold, stark companion. The open road is fraught with hazards, yes, bad drivers, mechanical malfunctions. But the most insidious danger, I now know, walks among us, exploiting our ingrained trust in authority, twisting our willingness to follow the rules into a weapon wielded against us. The silence of the open road is a fickle friend. It lulls you into a rhythm, mile after forgotten mile, until the unexpected shatters the peace. Every driver, seasoned or green, faces this truth when the horizon shifts and the ordinary becomes fatal in a blink. It's a lesson etched not in textbooks, but in the screech of tires and the sickening crunch of steel. A lesson learned too late for some,